Margaret swore she'd never speak to her daughter again. But 10 years later, they met on Dr. Phil's stage, and the unthinkable happened. When she finally said the words, "I can forgive you," Dr. Phil stopped the show. The audience didn't breathe. You could feel the tension, the kind that hums through a room when a decade of pain is about to speak. Margaret sat stiff in her chair. Her hands were folded so tight her knuckles had turned white. Across from her, Lily trembled, the daughter she hadn't seen or spoken to in 10 long years. Between them sat Dr. Phil, calm, focused, his eyes moving from one woman to the other like a referee at the edge of history. He started softly. "Margaret, when you look at your daughter, what do you see?" Her eyes flicked up, only for a second. "I see the reason my husband isn't here." Lily's lips quivered. You could see her trying to hold herself together, but every word landed like a blow. She whispered, "Mom, please," but Margaret's voice cut through her like glass. "You don't get to call me that. Not after what you did." The studio went silent. No coughs, no whispers, nothing. Just the hum of the stage lights. Dr. Phil leaned forward, unshaken. "Lily," he said gently, "tell me what you came here to say." Lily's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't come here to defend myself," she said softly. "I came here because I can't keep living with what happened that night." The sound of her voice cracked something open in the room. You could feel it, the ache, the years of silence stretching out between them. Margaret looked down, jaw trembling, but her pride kept her still. Dr. Phil's tone stayed calm, but firm. "You've both carried this pain for 10 years. Someone has to put it down first. Margaret, do you still love her?" It was one of those questions you could only ask in that room. Heavy, simple, unavoidable. Margaret froze. Her shoulders shook slightly. "I don't know how to love her," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "Every time I look at her, I see him." Lily's eyes filled instantly. "Dad's gone because of me," she said through tears. "I know that. I've known that every day." Margaret's face twisted in grief. "You don't know what that night did to me." Her words came out like an exhale that had been trapped for a decade. Dr. Phil leaned back, giving the silence space to breathe. The camera zoomed in. Two women, broken by one tragedy neither could explain, staring at the remains of family. In that stillness, Lily's voice shook. "I came here because I can't lose another 10 years pretending I don't miss you." The entire audience softened, the collective sound of empathy breaking through judgment. Margaret looked up, her lips trembling, eyes swimming in tears. She didn't speak. She just reached out, a hesitant, shaking hand. Lily hesitated too, afraid to believe it. But when their fingers finally touched, the audience gasped. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't even peace. But it was the first time in 10 years that a mother reached for her daughter instead of pushing her away. Dr. Phil's voice dropped low. "Sometimes love doesn't sound like words. Sometimes it sounds like silence finally ending. When someone we love hurts us, do we ever stop loving them? Or do we just build walls high enough to keep the love from getting out?" The lights dimmed. Dr. Phil looked down, then back up at Margaret. "What happened that night?" he asked. Margaret's answer came like a whisper, one that hinted at everything to come. "You really want to know?" The memory came back to Lily like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. 10 years earlier, the night that changed everything. Rain hit the kitchen windows in hard, uneven streaks. The clock on the wall blinked 11:48 p.m. Her father still wasn't home. Her mother paced, phone in hand, voice sharp with worry. "Where is he, Lily?" Margaret demanded, tears already forming. "He should have been home hours ago." Lily was 17, angry, restless, the kind of teenager who thought freedom meant never being wrong. "Maybe he's just out, Mom. You're always assuming the worst." The sound of tires screeching outside cut her sentence in half. Blue and red lights flashed through the window, police lights. Then came a knock. Margaret's face went blank before the words even reached her. The officer stood in the doorway, soaked and hesitant. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you, your husband was involved in an accident. He didn't make it." The world went silent, the kind of silence that drowns. Margaret collapsed against the counter, sobbing uncontrollably. But Lily, she just stood there, frozen, her mind playing back every moment leading up to that call. because she knew something her mother didn't. She had been there. An hour before the crash, Lily had argued with her dad. She'd begged him to let her drive home from her friend's house, even though it was raining. He said no. Too late, too dangerous. They argued all the way to the car. He'd finally sighed, fine, just get in. But when they hit that sharp turn on Lakewood Road, he had taken the wheel back. You're not ready for this, he said. Seconds later, the headlights, the sound of shattering glass, and then darkness. Lily survived. He didn't. She never told her mother that he had been driving. She let Margaret believe the crash was her fault, that her recklessness had killed him, because she thought it was easier to live as the villain than to tell the truth and lose the only parent she had left. But lies, even the ones told out of love, don't fade. They rot. In the days after the funeral, the house turned into a minefield of silence. Margaret barely spoke. Lily tried to apologize, but every word sounded wrong. Until that night. It started small, a broken vase. Margaret had brushed against the counter, knocking it over. The sound startled her, and for the first time, months of grief burst out like fire. Do you even care what you've done? She yelled. Lily snapped back. You think you're the only one who lost him. Her mother's eyes filled with rage. You killed my husband. Lily's voice broke. It was an accident. Don't you dare use that word. Margaret screamed. Accident means nobody's to blame, but you were behind that wheel. Lily froze. She could have told her the truth right then, that her father was driving, that he was protecting her, that he died saving her. But guilt has a way of stealing your tongue. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face. You'll never understand. Margaret's voice dropped, low and trembling. You're just like him. The words hit like a physical slap. Lily didn't respond. She ran upstairs, stuffed her backpack, and by sunrise, she was gone. No note, no would-be. And for the next 10 years, neither of them spoke a word. In those years, Margaret told people her daughter moved away. She told herself she didn't care. But sometimes, late at night, she'd walk into Lily's room and sit on the bed, staring at the posters, the half-burned candles, the smell of shampoo still faint on the pillowcase. She missed her and hated herself for missing her, because in her heart, she still believed one thing. Lily had taken everything from her. Back in the studio, as Margaret sat across from her grown daughter, that night played on repeat in her mind. The rain, the crash, the scream she never heard but always imagined. And Dr. Phil's voice brought her back to the present. Margaret, he said softly, what did that night do to you? She whispered, it took my husband and it took my daughter with him. Some wounds don't heal with time. They just learn how to hide better. How do you forgive someone when every memory still feels like proof they don't deserve it? Lily had built her new life out of distance. A different state, a tiny apartment, a job she didn't love but could disappear into. It was safer that way. When you've spent years living with guilt, silence starts to feel like home. But guilt is loud in quiet rooms. Every night, she'd sit by her window with a cup of cold tea, writing letters she never planned to send. She always started them the same way. Dear Mom, I'm sorry. She'd tell Margaret everything she couldn't say 10 years ago. About the rain, about the fight, about how her father, not her, was driving that night. How he'd reached over to take the wheel just before the crash. How his last words were, tell your mother I love her. But she never sent those letters. She'd fold each one neatly, slide it into an envelope, and stack it in a box under her bed, a monument to all the apologies that would never be heard. Sometimes she'd think, what's the point now? Her mother had made it clear forgiveness wasn't an option, but that didn't stop Lily from wanting it. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Margaret was living her own kind of silence. The house hadn't changed. Lily's room still smelled faintly of her favorite lavender shampoo. The photos were still on the wall, but the smiles looked like strangers now. She'd walk past the door every morning, pausing for just a second, long enough to remember, short enough to deny it. Because remembering hurt too much, and forgetting felt like betrayal. One afternoon, while dusting Lily's dresser, she found something hidden in the bottom drawer, a birthday card, the kind her daughter used to make by hand. Inside was a faded Polaroid, Lily at 5 years old, standing beside her father, grinning with frosting on her cheeks. Margaret sat down hard on the bed. For the first time in years, she let herself cry without stopping it. "You should be here," she whispered. "Both of you." That night, she poured herself a drink she didn't need and stared at the television until the sound became white noise. On the screen, an episode of Dr. Phil played, a mother and daughter trying to reconcile after years of silence. Margaret reached for the remote and froze. The woman on screen was crying, saying, "I thought it was too late." Something in those words cracked through the wall around Margaret's heart. She turned up the volume. By the end of the episode, her hands were shaking. She whispered, maybe it's not too late." That same week, across the country, a TV producer was combing through online submissions for reunion stories. Families torn apart by secrets, by guilt, by time. One caught her attention. "My mom hasn't spoken to me since my dad died. I need her to know the truth." It was signed, Lily S. The producer picked up the phone. When she called Margaret days later, Margaret almost hung up. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, kept her listening. "Ms. Taylor," the producer said, "we're doing a special episode on reconciliation. We heard your story might be a fit." Margaret laughed bitterly. "My story ended 10 years ago." "Maybe not," the woman said softly. "Your daughter reached out." Those 4 words landed like lightning. Margaret's breath caught. "She what?" "We could bring you both here. You don't have to decide now." After the call, Margaret sat alone at her kitchen table. For an hour, she didn't move. The house felt alive again, filled with echoes. She walked upstairs and opened Lily's room. The air was still, like time had been holding its breath. On the nightstand sat a box she'd never opened. Inside, old birthday cards, photos, and one envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in her daughter's handwriting. The postmark was 9 years old. Margaret's fingers trembled as she turned it over. The seal was still intact. She stared at it for a long time, but she couldn't open it, not yet. She slipped it back into the box, closed the lid, and whispered, "Not until I see your face." Across the country, Lily was doing the same thing, rehearsing the words she'd waited a decade to say. "I didn't kill him, Mom," she whispered into the mirror, "but I let you think I did." She didn't know her mother had found the letter. She didn't know that both of them, for the first time in 10 years, were about to walk into the same room again. Because a week later, 2 separate invitations went out, each one signed by the same man, Dr. Phil McGraw. And neither woman knew the other had agreed. Some secrets don't hide to protect others. They hide because hope is too painful to touch. What's heavier, the truth we hide or the forgiveness we refuse to give? The morning of the taping felt unreal. The sky over Los Angeles was washed out gray, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory. Lily arrived first. The car door slammed behind her, and for a second she just stood there, staring at the tall studio building. Her palms were damp. She'd rehearsed this day 100 times in her head, but now that it was real, her heart wouldn't slow down. Inside, a producer met her with a clipboard and a sympathetic smile. "You ready?" "No," Lily whispered. "But I have to be." They led her to a small dressing room. A cup of tea sat waiting. On the mirror, someone had left a sticky note. "You're safe here." She looked at her reflection. Older, thinner, stronger. 10 years of running had changed her face, but the guilt was still the same. Down the hall, another door opened. Margaret stepped out of her own car, clutching her purse like a shield. Her hair was perfectly brushed, her lipstick flawless, but her eyes told the truth. She was terrified. The staff guided her into a separate room, only 30 feet away from her daughter, but it might as well have been 1,000 miles. "Mrs. Taylor," the producer said softly, "your daughter wants to talk. We'll start slow. Dr. Phil will guide the conversation." Margaret nodded, but her voice cracked. "I don't know if I can look at her." "You don't have to forgive her," the woman replied. "Just listen." The word listen echoed in Margaret's mind. For 10 years, she hadn't let herself even imagine her daughter's voice. Then the cue light blinked red in the hallway. The show was about to start. The audience applauded as Dr. Phil walked onto the stage. His tone was steady, the same calm authority that had carried 1,000 stories before this one. "Today," he began, "we're sitting down with a mother and daughter separated by tragedy," and a silence that followed. The applause faded. Please welcome Margaret and Lily. The doors opened. Two women walked from opposite sides of the stage. Neither looked at the other. They sat. The distance between them felt like an ocean. Dr. Phil looked at Lily first. Tell us why you're here. Lily's throat tightened. Because I'm tired of being the villain in my own family, she said softly. And because there's something my mom doesn't know. Margaret's jaw clenched. Don't you dare twist it. Mrs. Taylor, Dr. Phil said gently, I promise, everyone here will get their turn. But right now, your daughter needs to be heard. Lily's hands shook in her lap. That night, the night Dad died, you think I was driving? Margaret's eyes flashed. You were driving? You said I lied. Lily's voice broke. He was behind the wheel, Mom. He grabbed it from me. I begged him to let me drive, but he said no. I didn't kill him. He was trying to protect me. The words hit like thunder. The audience gasped. Dr. Phil didn't move. His face stayed neutral, letting the silence carry the truth. Margaret blinked rapidly, processing, shaking her head. That's not true. That can't be true. The police report, they never asked who was driving, Lily said. They just assumed. And I let them. Because you needed someone to blame. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came out. For 10 years, she had carried anger like armor. Now it cracked piece by piece. Dr. Phil's voice dropped lower. Margaret, you've carried guilt and grief for a decade. But what if the story you've told yourself isn't the truth? She looked at Lily, really looked at her, and saw her child again for the first time. The trembling chin, the same brown eyes that used to light up when she said Mom. Margaret's body shook. You should have told me, she whispered. I was 17, Lily cried. You hated me. I thought if I told you, you'd hate me more. The studio fell into silence again. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, afraid to intrude on something sacred. Dr. Phil leaned forward. Margaret, what would your husband say if you were sitting in this chair right now? Margaret's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely audible. He'd tell me to let her go, to stop punishing her for something that wasn't hers to carry. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Lily reached for her hand, hesitantly, trembling, but Margaret didn't pull away this time. The crowd exhaled. Some cried quietly. Then Dr. Phil spoke again, the kind of line that cut straight to the core. You can live the rest of your life angry, or you can start living it honest. Which one sounds more like love? Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said honestly. But I think I want to try. Lily nodded, tears streaming. That's all I need. The segment faded to black. Backstage, producers whispered that they'd never seen a studio so still. When the truth finally comes out, do we lose control, or do we finally regain it? When the red recording light finally dimmed, the studio exhaled like it had been holding its breath for an hour. The audience didn't rush to leave. Some wiped tears. Others just sat there, stunned, silent, unwilling to break the spell. Margaret didn't move. Her hand was still resting over Lily's, the two of them frozen in a fragile, uncertain peace. Dr. Phil removed his microphone quietly. Let's give him a minute, he told the crew. The producers nodded and stepped away. The camera stopped, but the moment, the real story, kept rolling. For the first time in 10 years, there were no scripts, no blame, no stage. Just a mother and daughter in the raw aftermath of truth. Margaret's voice came first, trembling. You said your father was driving. Lily nodded. He took the wheel from me. I was scared. He thought he could control the turn. Margaret closed her eyes, and her shoulders fell like she'd been carrying the world. All this time, she whispered, I thought you. She stopped, choking on the words. I know, Lily said softly. And I let you. The quiet was suffocating. Only the sound of tissue boxes being passed around backstage broke it. Dr. Phil re-entered, but not as a host, as a counselor. He sat beside them. I've seen a lot of pain in this chair, he said, but what I'm seeing now is two people still choosing to be here. That's the start of healing. Margaret looked at him, tears clinging to her lashes. I don't know how to start. He nodded. You start by telling the truth, not to punish, but to release. She turned back to Lily. I blamed you for everything, she said. I told myself it made me strong, but it just made me lonely. Lily's voice cracked. I thought I deserved your hate. I thought I killed him, even if it wasn't my hands. I was there, Mom. I watched it happen. Margaret reached out again, this time without hesitation. She touched her daughter's cheek. You didn't kill him, she said. You lived, and I punished you for surviving. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was real. Dr. Phil leaned back, giving them space. Sometimes forgiveness isn't a word, he said. It's a decision to stop letting yesterday decide tomorrow. The studio lights dimmed as the day wound down. The crew packed up. The soundstage felt emptier than before, like something sacred had just been confessed to the air itself. Later, in the hallway, Lily turned to her mother. Do you hate me less now? Margaret smiled faintly, the first real one in years. No, she said. I just see you clearer. They left together, side by side, not talking, just walking. Days later, Dr. Phil received a small envelope at the studio. His assistant brought it into his office. Inside was a handwritten note on line paper. It was from Margaret. Tell her I opened the letter. No signature. No explanation. Just that sentence. But it said everything. Somewhere, Lily was sitting at her own kitchen table, staring at her phone, unsure if her mother would ever call. And then her phone buzzed. Mom, I read it. Let's start over. Tears filled Lily's eyes. For the first time in a decade, the word mom didn't hurt to read. Sometimes, healing doesn't come in a grand apology. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, in a single message that says, I'm still here. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing peace over proof. Can you ever truly move on without remembering? Or is remembering the only way to heal? 6 months later, the world had already moved on, but for Margaret and Lily, life was only just beginning again. The show had aired, millions watched, and comments flooded in. Some called it a miracle. Others called it too late. But neither of them cared about the noise anymore. For the first time in a decade, mother and daughter were learning how to talk without breaking. Lily still lived across the country, but now they spoke every Sunday. Sometimes it was long phone calls full of laughter. Sometimes it was quiet, just two voices breathing on opposite ends of forgiveness. In early spring, Lily flew home. The house looked smaller now, but warmer somehow. Margaret waited on the porch, arms crossed, trying not to cry before her daughter even stepped out of the car. They hugged, awkwardly at first, then tightly, the kind of hug that says we both survived. That afternoon, they drove together to the spot on Lakewood Road, the place where it all began. The road was peaceful now. Grass had grown over the guardrail, birds cut through the sky. Margaret held a small wooden box. Lily carried a single white rose. They stood by the curve in silence for a long time. Then Margaret knelt and placed the box in the grass. Inside were pieces of their shared past. Her husband's old watch, the unopened envelope Lily had written, and a small note that read, "The truth set us free." She covered it gently with soil. Lily placed the rose on top. Margaret whispered, "I think he'd be proud of us." Lily smiled through tears. "You think he's still watching?" Margaret nodded. "I think he's been waiting for this." As they stood there, the camera crew, now filming a quiet follow-up, stayed back, letting the scene breathe. You could hear the wind move through the trees, soft and forgiving. Dr. Phil's voice came in through narration, calm, reflective, and heavy with compassion. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened," he said. "It doesn't rewrite the past, but it changes the way the story ends." When Margaret forgave her daughter, she didn't just free Lily, she freed herself. Cut to the studio, months later. Margaret and Lily sat side by side for a brief update. Their hands rested together on the couch between them. Dr. Phil looked at them with a quiet smile. "How's life been since the show?" Margaret laughed softly. "Peaceful," she said. "Messy, but peaceful." Lily nodded. "We're figuring it out, one call at a time." He leaned forward. "Do you think forgiveness changes people?" Margaret took a moment. "No," she said. "I think it reveals who they were before the pain." The audience applauded. Not the wild kind, but the slow, tearful kind that fills a room with warmth. As the lights dimmed, Dr. Phil looked directly into the camera. His tone turned gentle, almost like a prayer. "Sometimes," he said, "the bravest thing you can do is forgive someone before life takes the chance away. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live in the truth instead of the story. He paused, then smiled faintly. Margaret didn't lose her daughter that day. She finally found her. The piano music swelled, soft, hopeful, the sound of closure. The screen faded to black. Words appeared, dedicated to everyone learning how to forgive, and to those still waiting for the chance. Would you rather be right or be free? If this story moved you, share it with someone who's still holding on to pain. Because sometimes saying, "I forgive you," isn't the end of a story, it's the start of a new one. And if you're still waiting for that moment, don't lose hope. The truth always finds its way home.